Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm majoring in game design.
Hi, I'm Connor, and I'm majoring in biomedical sciences.
Hello, I'm Brendan, and I'm majoring in theme park and attraction management.
Hi, I'm Sean, I'm majoring in mechanical engineering, and we are Duck Genetics.
When I rolled into class for the first time, I discovered that I was going to have to present a scientific topic of my choosing to a class of either middle or elementary schoolers. I panicked and internally whined, "This is not what I signed up for, this is not fair, and this has to be some kind of violation of the social contract." And I considered dropping the class, but then I realized I was going to have to take it anyway, so I would just be postponing the inevitable.
I did know about the STEM Day presentation before taking this class because I knew someone who took this class last semester, but it didn't really hit me until the first day of class that I would actually have to write, prepare, and present a presentation to a bunch of elementary or middle schoolers while representing the entirety of UCF. I remember going back to my dorm that day after the first day of class and being really stressed and trying to figure out any way I could get out of the assignment and maybe even dropping the class entirely.
When I first heard about STEM Day, my immediate reaction was to go ask my friend what she thought. She's in another speech class, and her response to that was, "What's that?" Which immediately told me that her class wasn't participating in STEM Day, which made me sort of want to switch classes because the thought of speaking to a bunch of children about STEM Day topics wasn't particularly appealing to me, but I decided to stay in because I knew it'd be a valuable experience for the future.
So initially when I was reading the syllabus, I was worried about STEM Day. I was worried about having to present to a younger audience because I had never really presented as such to a younger audience before, but I figured at that point, you know what, I'll probably be more experienced with presenting by that point. So when we were pitching ideas for STEM Day as well, I initially considered pitching a roller coaster idea involving kinetic and potential energy. Unfortunately, at that time, I decided, you know what, I'm going to be talking way too much about theme parks in this class already, so let me not do that. And then I proceeded to make both my informative and persuasive and impromptu presentations. All three of those ended up being about theme parks. So after our group formed, it was full steam ahead after the informative and persuasives.
My immediate reaction was, oh no, I remember there being a bunch of little kids on campus last semester. I really do not want to deal with that. So I thought to myself, okay, you know what, I'm going to have to deal with it anyway because I'm going to have to take this class anyway, but I'm just going to try my best to not be condescending as I try not to speak down to these little children as I explain advanced topics to them. But we ended up choosing a very nice topic for them, which is genetics.
All students who take this class will end up having to one day present at STEM Day, and so understanding good strategies for presenting well at this event is very beneficial to all of us.
So today, we'll be talking about our STEM Day presentation, and hopefully you can use our experiences to better your own STEM Day presentation, and preparation is the key to a successful STEM Day presentation. So today we'll be talking about our personal roadblocks, our successes, and what we could have done differently so you can use these to not make the same mistakes we did. Before we get into it though, I want to tell you what our presentation was about. So as Sean mentioned, we presented on genetics, and we used ducks as an example to explain how genetic traits are passed down from parents to offspring, and then we moved on and simulated natural selection, again using the ducklings as offspring, to simulate how certain genetic traits are favorable in different conditions.
So now that you're familiar with what our presentation was about, let's go over our roadblocks. Our STEM Day presentation had many roadblocks that we dealt with along the way. One of the very major roadblocks was that we left pretty much everything to the last minute. Up until we had about a week after we finished our persuasive speeches in speech class, and that left us with just a little bit over a week to prepare and fully practice and rehearse our STEM Day presentations before that Friday, which we're supposed to rehearse. But because we left the preparation of all the materials and all the scripts and everything, it wasn't all completely ready. So as you can see, we have one of our documents here, but there are some X's in the traits columns because we weren't sure how long the presentation was going to be. So if we needed to, we were going to cut those traits. But in our haste to finish everything, we forgot to cut those traits. We call them the elusive X's. But we seemed to gather everything, at least we thought, in the short amount of time, and I think that was we hopped one of those major roadblocks.
Another one of our major roadblocks was that a lot of our group showed up late to the presentation.
What's up, y'all? It's currently 10:50 a.m. and the group is not here yet. We are all here. Everyone is chilling at the function, and yet no middle schooler is here right now. So, you know what, Bill?
So you can see from the video that for about the first 15 minutes of our presentation, no one had showed up. We were just kind of goofing off into the hallway until finally we had some kids show up, but it was only 10 of them, and we thought we were going to have 20 students. So we had to rush to reorganize all our desks that were made for groups of 20 kids to fit the smaller number. And then after Rebecca had finished our first lecture of the presentation, the other half of the kids showed up, and so we had to reorganize again, and it threw everything off, and we had to really speed run through the rest of the presentation with the limited time that we had to make sure that they got out at the correct time.
So another roadblock was that due to us relying on our kids being in groups, we requested in our materials list that we had tables with chairs on them so that we could group kids together at these tables and they could collaborate to work together. But when we showed up in the classroom that we were assigned, we were given individual desks, and these weren't just normal desks with like square desks, like tables on them. They were weird shapes, which caused grouping to be a bit more complicated. There were holes in the middle of the group desks together, and then some of the desks were slanted. So this caused problems, especially at the part where we had the kids roll dice, and constantly the dice would fall off or into the middle. And one girl in my group got so fed up that when she would roll the dice, she would just like slam it just to stop it, so she didn't have to pick it up every time.
Another roadblock was printer issues the morning of the presentation. I had just finished reviewing our printed materials and successfully missing the X's, and I decided to go to the VHC to go print out our materials. But the printer broke down, and so I had to go get someone to help, and the entire process took a lot longer than I expected, making me late to our prep session.
Another significant roadblock that we experienced was that we only had one session, which meant we only had one chance to get it ready. Also, because we only had one session, we didn't have multiple to go through so we could get more comfortable with repeating the material. And it also meant that we had little experience to draw on for this speech.
So those were a couple of our roadblocks. Now let's move on to some of the things that went well for us.
So our group had many successes. The first of which is that, as mentioned earlier, the group showed up late, but we were able to adapt to a shortened time period. So the group showed up halfway through the presentation, but we were still managed to complete the presentation on time and keep the kids organized, which was a miracle in my opinion. But another success we had was that we noticed the groups greatly enjoyed the second activity as well as the prizes associated with them. The groups were very enthusiastic, especially when we brought out the ducks with X's on their eyes. That got a big reaction from everyone. And the kids also enjoyed the squeaking factor of the ducks, which is shown here. It's probably a bit of a nightmare for the teachers.
Another one of our big successes was our ability to adapt to our situation despite it not being quite what we had envisioned. We had wanted bigger desks for groups to be able to collaborate all in the same space, but we didn't end up getting that. So we had to move the chairs with individual desks together to make tables, which ultimately was about the same effect as having a large table. It just made the activity of rolling the dice a little bit harder.
One other major success was that everyone was actually able to show up on time to the presentation, because as it would have it, my roommates got stuck in an elevator that morning, and how unfortunate it would have been if I had left 5 or 10 minutes earlier. I would have been in that elevator, and I would have been very late because that was a half an hour wait for them. So I made sure they were okay, and then I booked my way to the presentation. But luckily, none of us got caught in an elevator.
Another success was that we picked a time during which we could all present. We originally thought we were going to have 3 sessions, but when only one got booked, we all decided to come to that session. I skipped my engineering lecture to go. That was not a problem for me. I was very happy to skip. And because none of us got stuck in an elevator, we were all able to show up. As it turns out, it was really good that we were all there. We had exactly the right amount of people for all the tasks we had to do, and so that everyone could present one section of the presentation. If we had had one fewer person, the entire process would have been a lot more complicated.
So another one of our major successes was our team chemistry. We had no major conflicts. We were able to present our ideas with relative ease, and we worked together very smoothly in our groups. Exhibit A for our cohesiveness as a group was when all of the students were coming in late. We were able to organize them essentially without any sort of real verbal communication. Another one of our major successes here was that we were able to give ourselves more ethos and accessibility to the students with our introductions, because most of us are majoring in some form of STEM major. I'm the exception.
So now that we've gone over some of the things that went well on our STEM Day presentation, let's talk about some of the things that we could have done to make it even better. Our STEM Day presentation had many ways that it could have been improved. For instance, we had very few signups for our time slots because we picked middle schoolers as our target audience. If we had picked elementary schoolers instead, like the other group in our class had, we likely would have had a full day with lots of presentations. Having only one presentation slot in the day isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it did put a lot more pressure on that presentation to make sure that everything went well, and also gave us a much more limited experience for us to talk about when making this presentation.
So our next thing that could have been improved is linked to the point Jeff made. The reason we picked middle schoolers was that we thought that our topic was too advanced for elementary schoolers, but after doing the presentation, we realized that the middle schoolers understood what we were saying really easily and didn't need any extra explanations or help. So given how simply we explained the material, we think we could have served both age groups.
Jumping on what Rebecca said, we also underestimated how easily they would understand the activity. So when we gave them the activity to roll the dice and understand the dominant versus the recessive traits, we had assigned each group member to a group, 1 of 5, and we'd be there to explain, help walk them through the activity if they needed any help. But none of the other groups needed actually any help. And so, as we're trying to help them out here are some of our joke representations of our thoughts on STEM Day. As we thought we needed to help them out more, but it turns out we didn't. We also thought that they wouldn't understand the material as well, just as Rebecca said. So this is part of our reasoning for this, but they understood it quite well.
So another improvement we could have made was we could have had a more solid plan on whether different time slots for how early or late the kids would have been. I mean, we did have a plan. If kids were a few minutes late or a few minutes early, we would just elongate or shorten the presentation a little bit. It didn't really take much thought, but we did not account for the kids being 15 minutes late. That is a lot of time. And I think if we had a more solid, filled out plan for if the kids were halfway through the presentation late, it would have been a more organized presentation, less rushed. Also, we did not account for the kids showing up in 2 separate groups. That really threw us off because the kids were there and we gave them the introduction, and then the second group showed up and then we had to sort of fill them in. So I think if we had a plan for these kids showing up separately, we could have had a better presentation. We also could have gathered materials and finished our PowerPoint earlier. If we had done this, we could have caught those elusive X's that we talked about earlier. And also we could have avoided some printer issues, or they could have still happened, but they wouldn't have affected our prep time. And then also, we did not know our room location until pretty much the last minute. We had to ask Dr. Parrish instead of receiving an email from the STEM Day management like we were supposed to. We should have followed up with management in order to get our room earlier, so we could have had more prep time in the room itself.
We also could have improved our presentation by being a little more flexible and specific with our room request. When we put our request in for the kinds of things that we wanted, we just said that we wanted tables and desks of some kind. And this led to us getting a bunch of individual desks that weren't very big, and we were envisioning larger group desks. So if we had been more specific like this in our request, we could have been a little bit better off from the get-go. But also when we got to our room, if we had been faster to just understand that we didn't get what we wanted and try to come up with a solution anyway, we could have moved past the problem of the desks a lot faster and been a lot more efficient with our use of time.
So the theme here is that planning is key. Overall, we just should have started working on the presentation earlier and had more solid plans for everything that could happen. Instead, we were out there memorizing our scripts an hour before the kids arrived. We did manage to pull it off, but if we had had more time as a team to decide who was going to say what in practice, it could have gone more smoothly. And if we had prepared our materials earlier, we could have probably caught the X's. So a major reason for this was that we had so many speeches to work on. we only had a week between the persuasive speech and STEM day, and the thing is, if you're going to choose whether to work on a speech coming up sooner, which is graded, or one that's farther into the future and ungraded, which one's going to take priority? And so because of this, we think Dr. Parrish should give the next classes more time in between the persuasive speech and STEM day, or require a STEM day outline or something like that earlier in the semester to force other groups to work on it earlier.
So now that we've discussed our personal roadblocks, our successes, and then finally our improvements that we could have made, I want to wrap things up. We're each going to share our own thoughts on how STEM Day affected us. But first, we're going to present a little gift that we made. It is a calendar that we made so that you can sort of plan out your semester and not run into the same time crunch problems that we did. So I'm going to go through the calendar now. So first slide, just summarize. I laid it out week by week because I know schedules need to be flexible. People have exams, people have plans. So for the first weeks, you just learn about STEM Day, and then you just prepare your own topic that you're going to present on. It's not too work heavy. It's just the introduction weeks. So, and then weeks 4 through 5 is when STEM Day groups are formed, and you have to fill out this exhibitor form. You need to be very specific again with your audience, your materials, and also your times for presentations. Don't make the same mistakes we did. And then weeks 5 through 7 is just beginning to work on the presentation and its aids. I've given tips here and there just to help you with some ideas. Weeks 8 through 9 is just a continuation. You need to finish up your presentation outline and also your presentational aids. And weeks 10 through 11 is when you really start practicing your presentation. You should have all the materials ready. Obviously you can make changes here and there, but you should be able to get your room by week 11 so you can practice in the location that you're going to give your final STEM Day presentation in. And then week 12 is STEM Day, so just make any final adjustments and good luck.
So my panic when I first heard about STEM Day was completely unfounded. If you actually pay attention in class, by the time STEM Day hits, you're going to have all the resources and knowledge you need to make a good presentation. Personally, I found the entire process fun, from the bouncing ideas off each other's stage to finally seeing it come to life in front of a bunch of middle schoolers. I found it incredibly satisfying to take my idea and turn it into reality.
So STEM Day left me with a very positive impression at the end of it. The morning of, I was no longer trying to find some way to get out of it or dreading taking the class like I was at the beginning of the semester. I felt really motivated and energetic to give the best presentation I could and to show all the skills off that I learned in the class up until that point. It was also really rewarding seeing the joy on all of our students' faces when they got the ducks at the end of our presentation, because they just seemed to all really enjoy it, and it made the whole process feel very rewarding, and like the students actually got something out of it.
STEM Day was overall a very positive experience for me. My initial apprehension was definitely an overreaction. I enjoyed our group very much. I think middle schoolers was a great target audience for our group, and honestly I wished we just had more presentations so we could have had more experiences presenting to different kids and also polished our presentation.
My initial reaction was an overreaction. Dealing with middle schools was actually very enjoyable to me. I enjoyed it more than I thought it would, as opposed to the wild judgment of high school students and the crazy behavior of elementary school students. The middle school students struck a nice balance. They paid attention well. It made me feel nice. When I spoke, I felt confidence in my words. So dealing with the middle schoolers and presenting to them was not as bad as I thought it would be.
So naturally, when we finished our STEM Day presentation, I was a bit relieved. So I went to Universal, of course, but I felt afterwards a little bit of regret that I didn't contribute enough to the STEM Day project overall. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed our discussions in class and outside of class, but I mostly just added humor to them instead of really contributing more so a lot of ideas and such. I felt that I was inhibited a bit by two things, technology-wise. One was my laptop setup at the dorm, which is a huge pain to move. I only brought the laptop to class one day, and it was really, really annoying to deal with it. Another was that I wasn't receiving the emails until like way later, so it was sort of inhibiting the flow of information, specifically towards me, I feel. But overall, I was happy with how the presentation turned out.
So STEM Day may seem to be a huge challenge, but if you're strategic about it and play your cards right, it can be a really fun, rewarding experience, even if you hit roadblocks.
And see.